All right, good evening. I have been trying my best to make sure that I could find a platform that I could record and you all could hear me easily and actually have access to these. So finally, we found something. I tried on Friday and that didn't work, which is why you don't have quiz 5 and 6. I'm going to post that this week, probably be up tomorrow, but I want to make sure that you have these video of 5 and 6 before we went into the exam next week. Okay, so let's go through and get through chapter 5. So the first one states that, let me see if I can switch this. Hold on. So we're going to talk about sterilization, all of these different techniques that are used in microbiology. Now, as early as the Stone Age, humans have used some type of physical methods of microbial control, wanting to control the growth of microbes. And more importantly, we use this, of course, to preserve foods. So when we select these methods of microbial control, we have to look at what method will do what would be best for each situation, because there are sometimes that we can use microbial control and it will affect the organism altogether. It may alter food, it may alter the flavor, it may alter the color, the taste. Sometimes we'll see that some things we may use for microbial control is hazardous to us or toxic to our health. So all of these factors we have to put in consideration when we're trying to limit the growth of microbes. So two terms that we're going to talk about, disinfection and antiseptics. So disinfectant, we often think about Clorox, we think about Lysol, we think about pneumonia, just plain old bleach. What we're doing when we use those disinfectants is we're trying to control and destroy harmful microbes on non-living things. So that means we're trying to wipe the desk off and free them of microbes. We're trying to wipe the stove off, the refrigerator, instruments. Now, when we talk about antiseptics, there's a difference there because we want to treat and get rid of microbes on living tissue. So antiseptic, things like peroxide that we use on our body or mouthwash, those are antiseptics. Betadine, some of those things that we use that's not going to be toxic to our skin. So we're going to go through each of the different types. What I love most about this book is how it ties history in with medicine, because we get to see what caused some of these inventions and what was going on in history at that moment to cause this. So one of the first ones we talked about is Joseph Lister. Very important because he introduced methods to prevent infection of wounds. So there were all types of microbes that we know now are just waiting and sitting on our skin that are our normal microbiota. They're just waiting to get inside of our wounds. And so he did some research and experiments to try to figure out what was causing all of these wounds, what was causing all of these deaths. And so what he came to realize that his research allowed us to start sterilizing instruments, because at this time we were taking instrument from patient to patient. And I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, we all know that's a no-no now. But in that time, just a simple dip in water or rinse in water would do the trick. But that's not true. They did not know the microbes from patient A, and you take that scalpel over to patient B, that they can easily be transferred. So physicians, again, did not know their hands could pass diseases from one patient to the next. They were not washing their hands. We talk about, especially around this time, how important it is as we go into flu season to make sure that you wash your hands. They didn't understand that airborne microbes can infect open wounds. And we know that with cold and flu season, we tell people, please cover your mouth, because we know those are airborne. They are what we call aerosol microbes because they can be transported, of course, through the air. So modern hospitals use strict procedures to avoid microbial contamination. So here's some terms that we're going to go through. So looking at approaches to control, here are the terms we're going to look at: decontamination, sanitize, preservation. We're also going to look at pasteurization. So decontamination, mouthful, decontamination. What it does is pretty much reduce pathogens to levels considered safe to handle, what we can safely operate in and not cause us to be sick. We look at sanitize. Sanitize is when we reduce the microbial population that meets accepted health standards. You'll often see hand sanitizer. I dislike hand sanitizer just because of what's in it. A lot of times, if it doesn't have at least 65% ethanol, I'm a stickler. So if it doesn't have 70% ethanol in it, I won't use it, because most of the time it's just making your hands dry and it's not doing what it's supposed to do with as far as reducing microbial population. Now, the ones that you see at the hospital are up to standards, as well as your ones like Purell that actually have the percentage of ethanol on the back. And not only that, you're supposed to thoroughly make sure that you vigorously wash your hands together, or rub your hands together with the sanitizer to make sure that all microbes have been reduced. It still does not take the place of washing hands. I prefer washing your hands. It is tried and true. Go with washing your hands, okay? Preservation, process of delaying spoilage of foods and other perishable products. So we have to think about when we're talking about food storage, we put a lot of chemicals in our food to make sure that it has a nice shelf life. We have canning of foods. We add salt to a lot of foods to preserve them, or we add sugar. If you think about jams, if any of your grandmothers or aunties or moms actually can jellies and all types of preserves, what they're doing is making sure the bacteria doesn't grow, because they're oversaturating the cell wall with excuse me, some type of sugar. Or back in the day, before we had refrigerators, we would salt everything. Everything was laid down with salt, and that kept the microbes from growing. Pasteurization, brief heating to reduce number of spoilage of organisms. We see this when it comes to milk. You'll see it with dairy. You will see that label over and over again about pasteurization. Approaches to control. Again, we have to look at all the factors when it comes to making sure that we are making good decisions when we are trying to control what goes on in the body, what is safe for us to ingest, and what is safe for us to clean with. So daily life, washing and scrubbing with soaps and detergents achieves routine control. Yes, yes, yes. Just wash your hand. Soap aids in mechanical removal of organisms. Good old fashioned, you're supposed to sing happy birthday when you wash your hands. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Crystal. Happy birthday to you. That is supposed to be enough time to do a good job with removing some microorganisms. Now, what we do have is normal microbiota on our skin. When we were in lab, you all swabbed different areas and you saw bacteria was supposed to grow, or you saw bacteria did grow. Very important, because they keep a check and balance with our body. They fight off other bacteria that come in, but if we do cut ourselves, that microbiota, those microorganisms are waiting to jump in. So again, hand washing with soap and water, most important step in stopping the spread of many infectious diseases, over and over again. Hospitals. Okay, so we see so many healthcare associated infections, HAIs. Patients are more susceptible to infection. We see that these pathogens are passed through feces, urine, respiratory droplets, and bodily secretions. A lot of people do get sick just by going to the hospital, not necessarily because they are a patient, but because they have visited someone who was a patient. My pastor at my church, she went to visit some sick and shut in, and she ended up contracting MRSA, and to the point where they thought they were going to have to amputate her leg. And the type of MRSA that she had, most people don't survive, but she was able to survive from that, and she did not have to get her leg amputated. But that was something that she contracted from the hospital just going to visit someone. What we're starting to see is we have to step up our ways of cleaning and sterilizing instruments. Sterilization, again, when we talk about the word sterilization, we mean nothing is present. There is no form of life, zip, zero, nothing is living. So when we do that, we're looking at sterilized glove, we're looking at sterilized scalpels, all types of tools in the operating room are sterilized. We're starting to see as we are moving on with these precautions, there are other microbes that are coming to the forefront, like prions. They are a protein, relatively new and difficult to destroy. They're pretty much resistant to bleach. They're resistant to heat, steam, a lot of the methods that we already use. You all have heard of mad cow disease, and mad cow disease is caused by prions. Microbiology laboratories, just like ours, we work with microbial cultures. We use rigorous methods of control. That's why I make sure that I tell you all, please don't eat in the lab and don't drink in the lab, because you will take these things home with you. So we try to eliminate as much contamination as possible. We work with sterile media. We sterilize the cultures. We always put gloves and a lot of the plates that we use in the biohazard bag so that they can be incinerated later, so that it doesn't get out into the environment. Aseptic technique, which you do have a quiz on that coming up soon, and talking about how to prevent contamination of samples in self-laboratory. Now, the CDC, which is the Center of Disease Control in Atlanta, gives us guidelines for labs working with microbes. So there are 4 safety levels. So the first biosafety level, or BSL-1, is what our lab is. Most high schools and colleges usually have a BSL-1 grade. What that means is we can work with diseases that are not known to cause disease. So we have a very weak or a very weak type of microbe. For example, in lab, we've been using E. coli and B. subtilis. The ones that we have is very weak, so it really won't cause too much disease. But we do, well, let me say this. It won't cause disease in healthy individuals. So if you are sick, yes, it will cause you to develop some type of disease or some type of infection. Now from BSL-1, we go to BSL-2. I've actually met a community college that has a BSL-2 lab in Gaston. And I was talking to the gentleman there, and he was saying that no cell phones are allowed in the lab just because of what they're dealing with. So everything has to be in a sterilized Ziploc bag, and they are left in a outside room that is locked up, where the students take all of their bags, purses, and everything in that room, and they have to leave it there. Because in this lab, they're able to deal with hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV, and salmonella. So these diseases are moderate and a potential hazard. Now, most of us would say, oh my gosh, HIV, it should be in a much serious or higher level. But what we have to realize is that HIV is not contagious when it is not in some type of liquid, such as blood or semen or breast milk or vaginal secretion. So as long as that is not, we don't have any open wounds or any of that is available, you can work with HIV. BSL-3 causes serious and potential lethal diseases. We start to see individuals put on masks, they put on hoods to make sure that the air is ventilated for themselves so they don't contract anything, because these are usually inhaled, or you are contracting them through inhalation. So we make sure that these individuals have their own suits. If you think about the movies like Outbreak or Contagion, that's what we saw those big yellow suits being put on for. Some of the diseases here will be like tuberculosis and West Nile virus. And the fourth, BSL-4, fatal disease. So these are lethal pathogens for which no vaccine or treatment exists. That would be like smallpox for your book that we're currently reading now, and Ebola. All right, approaches to control. I'm tongue-tied over here. Food and production facilities. Perishables, we know, retain quality longer when contaminated microbes are destroyed, removed, or inhibited. We know that when you look in the refrigerator, you can tell what has a longer shelf life. You notice what doesn't have a long shelf life because it starts to mold pretty quickly. And that is because microbes, which includes viruses, bacteria, and fungus, start to grow on it. A lot of times people pick on me about Aldi. I love Aldi and I love Lidl. They say you shouldn't eat the produce there because it goes bad so quickly. I like that it goes bad quickly because that means that there's not a lot of chemicals that is put on the food to preserve it. So I'm like, food is supposed to go bad. That is the purpose of food. It's biodegradable. It's supposed to do that. I remember one time buying a kiwi and forgetting about it. And 2 weeks later, I picked up the kiwi and it was hard as a rock. We all know that kiwi, you should get softer and softer. I threw that thing on the ground and normally it should have burst wide open. It bounced and kept rolling. I said, something is wrong. There's too many preservatives in there. Now, some of the ways that we try to sterilize or reduce microbial contamination, of course, is heat treatment, irradiation, chemical additives, and the FDA, which is the Federal Drug Administration, the Food and Drug Administration, regulates a lot of this, which is kind of dangerous right now, speaking that we have a government shutdown because things or foods are not being processed as they normally should be. Or it may be, in some instances, I did read that they were going to allow some FDA workers to come back, but they're not being paid. So I don't know about you, how effective I would be at work if I was there and I was not getting paid. Okay. Pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, deodorants must not carry microbial contamination. You can imagine that you don't want your cosmetics, your foundation, or your lipstick to have any microbes in it, as well as your deodorants. But what we'll find out in the lab when we start to look at some of your brushes, your makeup brushes, that a lot of bacteria already lives there. Water treatment facilities, we usually add chlorine to disinfect water. Very important here. Some organisms are resistant to chemical disinfectants. The more we try to control these microbes, they find another way to kind of one-up us or to always keep ahead of us. And this one is Cryptosporidium parvum, and it causes diarrhea, very bad diarrhea. So now we have regulations require facilities to minimize DBPSs and C. parvum in treated water. Okay, so they're trying to find new ways to make sure that the water that we drink is safe and that we don't have to think about it. Because as of now, we go to the water faucet, we go at home, you drink your sink water, you don't think about catching any kind of diseases because we are in the United States where that is pretty much always treated, except for Flint, Michigan, when they had lead in the water, but that is something totally different. Okay, how do we select which antimicrobes we're going to use? Like what type of antimicrobial process are we going to make sure that we get rid of? Okay, so we have to realize that the idea method does not exist. What may work in one scenario may not work in another one. Each one has a drawback, so we have to look at the pluses and minuses. How much more beneficial is this one than this other product? And does the benefit outweigh the cost? And I know that's terrible to say, but that's what we end up looking at. Like, is this little piece that'll be harmful to the population? Is that okay compared to the greater benefit? So what we look at is the type and number of microbes, environmental conditions, risk of infection, and composition of the infected item. Here we go. Now I'm going to start highlighting. Hopefully this will allow me to do that. Let me see if it'll allow me to switch. Can I? No, that's not going to work. Hold on. Let's see if I can have a highlighter. Yes, here we go. Let's highlight. Okay, type of microorganism. There are multiple resistant microbes. We're going to go through each one of them and you're going to see these names start to pop up more than once. So bacteria endospores. Anytime you see endospores, think scary. Scary endospores. There we go. Most resistant, only extreme heat or chemical treatment destroys them. Okay, so anytime we see endospores are in anthrax, which you'll also read in your book. Protozoan cyst and oocyst, resistant to disinfectants, excreted in feces, and causes diarrhea disease if ingested. So let's look at this one. This one is resistant to disinfectants. So we already see an issue that we have here. Okay. Mycobacterium species. We think about tuberculosis. Waxy cell walls makes resistant to many chemical treatments. Hard to treat. Pseudomonas, we will see over and over again. We will grow this one in the lab. It is resistant to and can actually grow in some disinfectants. That is very scary. The very thing that we use to kill it, it can actually grow into, because these bacteria have become so smart. They have developed different abilities to survive in the places we don't want them to. Non-envelope viruses lack a lipid envelope, and they're more resistant to disinfectants. And when we get into viruses, we will get a little more into that. Let's see. I'll move on. Number of microorganisms. We're always going to look at the time it takes for heat or for chemicals to kill the affected population. Now, heat kills microorganisms by denaturing their enzymes. So denaturing just means destroying the protein, which means it will not work anymore. And heat resistant, of course, varies among different microbes. The thermal death point that we talk about, looking at the lowest temperature at which all microorganisms are killed within 10 minutes. So we're looking here at the decimal reduction time, where the D value is going to gauge how effective this product is. How much time is required to kill 90% of the population under specific conditions? Now realize, when we first began, we started talking about sterilization, and sterilization eliminates everything. There's no microbes. But when we start talking about disinfectants, you see that we are starting to live with a certain population. We're going to reduce the number greatly, but there's still going to be a population that is still alive. So in here, we're looking at 90% of the population going away. Okay, so number of surviving cells from 1 to about 10,000, and time minimum at a given temperature. Okay, how much time do we have to get to this point? Okay. Environmental conditions. Dirt, grease, body fluids can interfere with heat penetration and action of chemicals. That's why it's so important to thoroughly clean. We make sure that we bleach everything down to make sure that there's no type of film that the bacteria or microorganisms, that can be viruses or fungus, can grow. We don't want any place to be inhabitable for them. We want to get rid of them. Okay, microorganisms and biofilm are most resistant. Let's highlight that. Biofilm we talked about in a previous chapter. We see biofilm in the plaque in our teeth. You'll also see biofilm at the bottom of your shower, at the drain, or at the top of your shower head. Biofilm grows there, and bacteria absolutely love it. pH and temperature can influence effectiveness. So household bleach solution can kill tuberculosis at 55 degrees Celsius in half the time as at 50 degrees Celsius. So the warming temperature helps expedite the destruction of the microbes. Let's see. Here we go. Risk for infection. So medical instruments are categorized according to risk for transmitting infectious agents. Remember, at the beginning, they were just passing instruments from place to place to place without actually sterilizing them. Again, sterilization of how we're going to destroy all microbes. So critical items come in contact with body tissue. So needles and scalpels, please, 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 we have to have them sterile. On every medical TV show, you see them go into the room, and the nurse or whoever assisting technician, surgical assistant, a surgical tech, is making sure that everything is laid out in a sterile package, and the physician or the provider on call, whoever it is, maybe it's a nurse practitioner, maybe it's the anesthesiologist, does not matter. They are going to be the first ones to open that package. We also have semi-critical instruments, which contact mucous membranes but don't penetrate body tissues. So that would be like your endoscopes and your endotracheal tube. So of course they're in contact with mucus, but they're not going inside of your lung to pierce it to another level. So it usually bypasses or rubs up against it. Then we have our non-critical instruments where they only contact unbroken skin. So countertops, stethoscopes, blood pressure cuffs, all things that we usually wipe down pretty much with alcohol. Self-sterilization and disinfection methods are inappropriate for certain times. what we have to realize is that sometimes heat can be dangerous. It can actually damage laboratory equipment and hospital equipment such as rubber and latex tubing that we see on dialysis machines. So we have to be very careful when we're looking at what will be the best fit to reduce or get rid of as much microbes as we can. So let's look at this. We're trying to compare and contrast pasteurization, sterilization, pressurized steam, and the commercial canning process. So heat treatment, very, very useful for microbial control. We like it because it's reliable, safe, fast, and inexpensive, and non-toxic. All of these are wonderful things when we are trying to decide which treatment method is the best and the safest. So it can be used to sterilize or disinfect. So we have two types of sterilization that we want to talk about. We have moist heat sterilization and dry heat. So moist heat irreversibly denatures proteins. And we talked about how denaturing means it's going to make sure that the protein no longer works. It cannot function because its original shape has been deformed, so it can't perform its normal function. So boiling destroys most microorganisms and viruses. That's why sometimes we say when we're traveling into different countries, make sure you boil your water because it does do a good job at destroying most microorganisms and viruses. Remember, we talked about endospores, that they are pretty resistant to temperatures. It has to be extremely hot temperature to get rid of them, which is why endospores can't survive. Pasteurization destroys heat-sensitive pathogens and spoilage organisms. So high temperature, short time. Milk, we take that about 72 degrees Celsius for 15 seconds, and ice cream needs to be at 82 degrees Celsius for about 20 seconds. Ultra high temperature, UHT, shelf-stable box juice, those Capri Suns, the apple juices, all of the high C punches that we give our kids or either we may still drink, and milk is known as ultra pasteurization. That one has always bothered me. I have never liked shelf-stable milk. I see it all the time. I think something is wrong with that. That is just my personal belief, but I don't drink milk anyway. I drink almond milk, which we know is not milk at all. But my grandfather had no problem drinking pet milk, which was canned milk, and he would drink that right out of the can. And in my head, it's always been milk belongs in the refrigerator. Otherwise, all kinds of interesting microbes will grow in it and surprise you when you open it, when you take a whiff. So milk, when it is shelf stable, it has to be at 140 degrees Celsius for a few seconds. And if you think about it, that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. So 140 degrees Celsius for microbes to be killed. That's done. Another one that we're using for moist heat is an autoclave. What you'll see as myself and DK often putting things through the autoclave, your plates that you get have to be autoclaved. And what autoclaving is we're using pressurized steam to kill microbes. When we were looking at boiling, we were just using moist heat to get rid of it. Here, we're using steam under pressure. Sterilization usually at about 121 degrees Celsius, about 15 psi's in 15 minutes. Prions are thought to be destroyed at 132 degrees Celsius for 1 hour. Remember we talked about prions in here. They are very, very hard to kill. That's what's in mad cow disease. Well, if we put them around 132 degrees Celsius for 1 hour, which is an extremely long time, the thought is that they will die. Commercial canning. All right, so they use an industrial size autoclave called retort. And why they have this is to destroy something called Clostridium botulinum. Now, this is the same thing that we use for Botox. Yes. So we want to get rid of endospores. Next time you all go to the grocery store, I encourage you to look at a jar of honey. It is a warning on the honey that says, please do not give to children under 1 year of age. The reason you don't want to do it is because under 1 year old, the child does not have an acidic stomach. Their stomach is usually around the pH of 7. Whereas with that pH, Clostridium is ever so happy to grow in that. And of course, we don't want that bacteria to grow. And with endospores, we know how hard that is to kill it. to continue to grow inside of the child and cause sickness and eventually death. Our digestive systems are more developed, so our pH is about pH of 2. But next time you go to the grocery store, make sure you look at the label for honey. This is very, very critical because endospores can germinate in canned foods. Cells grow in low anaerobic, so that means without oxygen conditions, and produce botulinum toxin. So what that is, any of you have seen canned goods, if they are dented, the thought was always, please don't ever buy a dented can, because if the can is dented, it can cause those endospores to start germinating, and then it could tear your stomach all to pieces as well as your system, and you could die from it. So they always say, please, please, please don't buy canned food. But that was back in the day. They've gotten a lot better now, but some people still will not pick up a dented can. Canned food is commercially sterile. This is why we tell people it's okay if you pick up a canned food and it's dented, because it's sterile. Remember the word sterile, sterilization, there's no microbes. However, there are some endospores of some thermophiles, meaning they are heat loving. They may survive, but usually not a concern. So that's the end of moist heat sterilization. Now we're looking at dry heat. Dry heat is less effective than moist heat, takes longer times and higher temperature. So when we are plating bacteria and I tell you to take your inoculating loop and take it through the flame, the Bunsen burner a couple of times, that is using dry heat to destroy microorganisms. We also use incineration. So the products that we use, and once the bacteria or whatever microbes we're using are starting to grow, we put them in the biohazard bins and they get shipped off, and a company actually puts them in an incinerator. Okay, so that burns everything up, and that is dry heat sterilization. So while our moist heat was the boiling and the autoclave, and our dry heat has been incineration and the inoculating loops. Another way that we can do them, of course, is to filter them out. Some materials cannot withstand heat treatment, so we have to go through some type of filtration. HEPA filters are very popular now. You can buy them for your vacuums. You can buy them for your vaporizers in your house, and what they do is remove just about all microbes from the air. So that's especially good for those microbes who are move or allow them to be contracted or contagious. There we go. They are contagious via aerosol. So HEPA filters are very, very good at that. All right, other physical methods to destroy microbes. Radiation. Now, radiation has various effects on cells depending on its wavelength, depending on its intensity, and depending on its duration. So we have two ways that radiation kills. We can do it through ionizing or non-ionizing. So when we're dealing with ionizing, we're dealing with X-rays and we're dealing with gamma rays. And what they do personally is damage the DNA. Now we know the DNA is the most, I won't say one of the most important parts of the cell. That's where we get the information to continue to replicate, continue to carry out the necessary functions. So again, ionizing radiation, gamma rays and X-rays. We need to know that it deals with gamma rays and X-rays, and it destroys DNA. Very, very important. Okay. Now the FDA has approved this for spices. So if you all have oregano, if you have thyme, if you have coriander, or you have mint, you have all these different herbs, they have gone through some type of ionizing radiation. We also find this is done for fruits and vegetables, is used on grains for insect control, pork for parasite control, poultry, beef, lamb, and pork for bacteria control. So you see that pork is coming up twice, okay? So dried herbs and spices have been FDA approved to use ionizing radiation. Some people are against this, and the reason they're against this because they're saying that we don't need any more radiation in our food more than what we already receive. Some people are completely against using microwaves. My sister-in-law will not use a microwave because she said it creates, it's too many studies saying on the radiation that they give off. To each its own. I use my microwave. Ultraviolet radiation is one of non-ionizing. Non-ionizing. So before we did ionizing, non-ionizing deals with ultraviolet radiation. It destroys microbes directly, right on spot. Now, it's used to destroy microbes in the air, water, and on surfaces, but it does have some downsides to it. It can't kill microbes in solids or turbid liquids. So turbid, you can't see through it. It's very, very thick. And most glass and plastic block. Must be careful used since damaging to the skin and eyes. We know how damaging UV rays are. They tell us in sunglasses, please don't look up into the sun because you can burn yourself because of the UV rays. We do like microwaves. Microwaves kill by generating heat, not directly. But the thing about it, microwave ovens heat food unevenly. So if it's a moist food, let's say it's a soup, we can kill most microbes in there because that food is moist. But when it's something dry, let's say like pork, and we put pork in the microwave, we can come up with a certain type of parasite that will come out. Yes, this is very true. A parasite that will come out called Trichinellus, and that is an outbreak from a nematode. And don't look and question and say, who cooks pork in the microwave? Because there have been people this season and last season, Christmas season, who cooked a turkey and who cooked a chicken in the microwave. So it has been done. Now, another thing I wanted to point out with UV radiation is that we have seen them with germicides, anything that's going to kill germs. Lamps are used in nurseries, operating rooms, and cafeterias that use that UV radiation. And the thought is to, of course, decrease what's going on, decrease the microbe growth. But the thing is, it has to be directly on there. If the radiation is not very penetrating, the organisms will continue to live. So they must be directly exposed to the rays. So that is the hard part there. Then we move on to high pressure. High pressure alters the molecular structure or proteins and carbohydrates, which are inactivated. So what it does is it throws off maybe the taste. So it avoids problem with high temperature and pasteurization. But we use it with things like guacamole. Destroys microbes by, again, denaturing proteins and altering the cell permeability. We know with permeability, that's the ease of things going in and out of the cellular membrane. But it does maintain color and flavor associated with fresh food. So here is a list of all that we went through. The moist heat, make sure you go through the types of moist heat. Also go through the types of dry heat, filtration, and radiation. Now let's look at the chemicals. This is usually what we use, everyday people, what we use on a daily basis to make sure that our homes and our workplaces are virus and microbe free. So we have sterilants. They destroy all microorganisms, also called sporicides, and they are heat sensitive critical instruments that we talked about, like needles and scalpels. Okay, sterilants, there's nothing living there. Like ethylene oxide. What happens in this process are the instruments are exposed to gas in this vacuum chamber. The only thing is it tends to be toxic for anyone who breathes around it, but it does kill everything inside of or laying on those instruments. Then we have high level disinfectants, which destroy viruses and vegetative cells that are kind of just lingering and haven't really done much. But they do not reliably kill endospores. Remember, we talked about how endospores are those cells that continue to grow, and they're very, very hard to destroy. So our semi-critical instruments are used there. You think about your semi-critical, your endoscopes, your trachs. We're going to make sure that's what that is used for there. Intermediate level disinfectants destroy vegetative bacteria, mycobacteria, fungi, and most viruses. So we disinfect non-critical instruments. Of course, non-critical instruments are going to be like the stethoscopes, the countertops, the blood pressure cuffs. Here we go with low-level disinfectants, destroy fungi, vegetative bacteria, except microbacteria, except, and envelope viruses. Please, please, please make sure that you're reading the labels for your Pine Sol, for your bleach. A lot of them have a time that it must sit on the surface for everything to be destroyed, or for a great portion of it to be destroyed. You think about it'll say certain viruses, but it needs to remain wet for 90 seconds, or it needs to sit still for 3 minutes. But most of us don't pay attention to that. We spray and we quickly wipe down instead of letting it sit for a few minutes. So please, when you're at home, next time, look at the labels of your disinfectants and follow the instructions for the best results. So again, selecting the appropriate germicidal chemical. We have to look at toxicity, activity, compatibility, residues, cost, storage, and stability, and the environmental risk. How toxic is it to us? What is the activity that it will be used for? What treatment is being, what material is being treated? The residues that this product leaves after we spray it or after we wipe something down with it, is it toxic or is it going to be corrosive? How expensive is it and how available is it? How is it if we store it, and what will it do to the environment? So alcohols, we use alcohols a lot. 60 to 80% of aqueous solutions of ethyl isopropyl alcohol. We think about, we use that, and we've used that in the lab for gram staining. You can use it for cleaning. Sometimes people clean their earrings with isopropyl alcohol. They clean their wounds with it. All different things. You'll say, okay, just wipe this off. You think about the alcohol pads. When we were doing blood typing and anatomy and physiology, you use isopropyl alcohol pads to wipe your finger before you get pricked, because it's going to kill vegetative bacteria and fungi. But again, it's not reliable against endospores. Some of the limitations is it evaporates quickly. It limits contact time, and it can damage some rubber plastics that we see in dialysis. Aldehydes, glutaraldehyde, formaldehyde, or OPA. For more formaldehyde, we use something similar called formalin, which is a derivative of it. And so it's a germicide that kills most microbes quickly. That's what we use for the cat dissections. That's also what we use for the animal organ dissection, whether it was a heart, whether it was a kidney, a cow eye, a brain, all of them were soaked in formalin. So it is used, of course, to preserve specimen and used to kill bacteria and inactivate viruses for vaccines. So I always tell people, you don't get sick from dissecting in class the animals or anything. What you get sick from is your own germs, or either just the smell of the formalin, but nothing from the animal is actually making you sick because nothing is living in them. Benguanide, so chlorhexidine is the most effective, extensive use as antiseptics. You think about how they're in skin cream and mouthwash. You can kind of feel them. You think about Listerine. You think about, what's another one? The Crest mouthwash. And so it's going to destroy vegetative bacteria, which is good, and some envelope viruses. But what I want you to know is when you're using Listerine, it actually tells you that you should be swishing for a full minute. Most of us do not. We give a couple swishes and then we spit it out. They actually had a commercial where you could see that it was actually burning in people's mouths as they were trying to hold it for a minute. So I challenge you to try to hold that in your mouth for about a minute. Ethylene oxide, that's one of the ones we use on those critical instruments like the needles and the scalpels. It is very useful. It destroys microbes, and of course, finally, something that's going to destroy endospores and viruses. Terrible, terrible thing. It penetrates fabric, equipment, implantable devices like pacemakers and artificial hips. But the bad thing is it is toxic. It is very toxic. It must be extensively aired. Mutagenic, which means it transforms, and potentially carcinogenic, which means it can eventually cause cancer. Halogens, we use chlorine. What we find is that it destroys all microorganisms and viruses. There's not too many things that can get past Clorox. You'll see that at daycares and school, they always have that nasty bottle of 3 parts water, 1 part bleach to make sure that they kill everything there. But we found out that bleach is very caustic to the skin and mucous membranes, because most people say, oh, well, any virus you can drink bleach. Wrong. Bleach is not good. It is a poison. It will burn you. So we always have to make sure that we have to dilute Clorox. Very, very low levels of disinfectant are placed in drinking water. Cryptosporidium oocytes we talked about, and Giardia cysts survive there. So we have to make sure that we have some type of Clorox present when you are drinking water, when you are trying to, hence the chlorine in the water, to try to destroy these things. Iodine is another good one. You will see iodine. They will place that on wounds to make sure that we kill a lot of vegetative cells, but again, it's unreliable on those endospores, which are very, very hard to kill. Metal compounds, we can use certain metals to kill different types of microbes. Silver, very important when we use it as an antiseptic. We use it for creams and bandages. We use it for gonorrhea. What will happen if a mother has gonorrhea? Baby comes out of the vaginal canal. We make sure that we put silver on the baby's eyes to prevent the gonorrhea infection. Some people don't use this anymore and they replace it with antibiotics, but it was very, very beneficial. Okay. We also see compounds of mercury, tin, and copper that are used as preservatives as well. But now they are strictly regulated. As you can imagine, we don't want to taste mercury, tin, or copper in our food. We often see that you'll see tuna and certain other fish have tons of mercury, and they want you to limit that. Ozone, O3, unstable form of oxygen, used as an alternative to chlorine. It's a disinfectant for water and wastewater. Perioxygens, we end up using hydrogen peroxide on a lot of things. I don't know if when you were a kid, you scrape your knee, your mom would put hydrogen peroxide on and you see it bubble and fizz. So it's most effective on an inanimate object, even though mom loves this for a cleanser of all wounds. Vapor phase can be used as a sterilant. Remember that word sterilant is going to wipe everything out. Phenolic compounds, we can use some of these. They kill most vegetative bacteria, but it has a nasty odor and irritates skin. Most products we will not use if it smells terrible, and most of the engineers that are coming up and scientists that are coming up with these products and they're engineering these products, they realize that our noses are very sensitive and we're not just going to use anything. Quaternary ammonia compounds, we use quats. They help remove dirt and organic matters. And here we go on into a very long list of how we use the classes of germicidal chemicals. I misspelled that. There we go. Preservatives, much better. All right, preservation of perishable products. We've talked about this before. Chemical preservatives, food preservatives must be non-toxic for safe ingestion. Okay, so these chemicals have to be okay for us to eat them. But oftentimes they alter the cell membrane function, controls mold and bacteria in food. So next time you are about to eat something, look on the back and see if you see these words benzoic, sorbic, or propanoic, because they are on a lot of the foods that we eat. Nitrate and nitrite are used in processed meats. There was a viral video going around not too long ago that showed McDonald's, and everyone thought that this pink stuff coming out of this machine was ice cream, strawberry ice cream. It was not. We should have known it was not, because their ice cream machine never works. What it actually was nitrate. So nitrate gives meat its pink color. So high concentration was given meat is pink color, more specific, the chicken. Okay, it has shown to be carcinogenic from nitrosamines. So what they have done is supposedly replace this out. They've taken it out, and now they say they have real chicken or real meat in their chicken. The good thing about this is that it did stop Clostridium. Bad thing is that it was carcinogenic. So again, we're starting to look at what's beneficial versus cost. Low temperature storage, what we found is we put stuff in the refrigerator, it will slow down the growth of microbes. It does not mean it will never grow, but it will definitely slow it down. We can also reduce available water by doing things like salting. Some of us love country ham because it's so salty. That salt was there to preserve the walls so that no microbes would enjoy that. But of course, there are some that still love the salty environments. Adding sugar or drying food. Some of us like dried food, like I love dried apricots and things like that, or banana chips. So addition of salt and sugar increases environmental solutes. Some bacteria grow in high salt environments, like Staphylococcus aureus loves any type of salty environment. It thrives there. Drying is often supplemented by salting. Lyophilization, freeze drying foods like coffee, milk, meats, fruits, and vegetables. Drying stops microbial growth but does not reliably kill. Numerous cases of salmonella from dried eggs. Please, please, please check the labels. A lot of you eat raw cookie dough and it is not good for you. Salmonella is sitting there waiting in its vegetative state to attack your body like rawr. So please make sure that you are reading these labels. Don't eat raw cookie dough. And last but not least, let's look at the contamination of an operating room. It is so important that our cleanup crew, which includes our janitorial staff, that they do a good job, because this is actually a picture of Pseudomonas. So pseudo A, this patient has pseudo A, and look where it got. So all these red spots are places of contamination. What we can assume from here with these lights is that they were using non-ionizing radiation. Remember, if it's non-ionizing radiation and it sits directly where the microbe is, it will kill it instantly. But if not, we only have lights here. We see all these different areas where it's hiding, which will be a breeding ground for another type of bacteria to form. Well, this is the end of chapter 5. I'm sorry if I was a little jittery and tongue-tied. It is way past my bedtime, but I wanted to make sure that you all got this video, and I will be posting chapter 6 as well. All right, have a good night. Bye-bye.